My name is Adam Levner.
Great. And what are you working on now to solve today's problems? What's your story? How did you get to what you're doing now? Both of those.
I'm the executive director of an organization called Critical Exposure, and our mission is to teach middle and high school students how to use the power of photography and their own voices to become effective advocates for school reform and social change. I co-founded the organization in 2004 with Heather Riemann, a friend from college. And we basically started the organization because we'd both been working in education for years and saw just how disparate the conditions in schools were depending on whether they were being attended by low-income students and families or wealthy students and families. And realized that we needed to find a way to make this message much more real than by talking about per pupil formulas. So we got some cameras and started working with a group of kids in Baltimore and basically saw that we could really have an impact on three different levels. One, it really had some great impact on the students themselves. So we termed that youth empowerment. That's basically giving the cameras to students and helping them to understand that they can use photography and art as a way to make sure that their voices get heard. The second was public engagement. We were able to help the students engage hundreds of people in their community through exhibits, media coverage, testifying at legislative hearings, every way we could think of to get the students' photos out there so that the community understood what the issues were through the eyes of the students. And then the last was policy change. What we really think makes us unique is that we're not just working on art. Students take these photographs and then use them actively to make changes in their communities and their schools to address the issues that they're documenting in the first place. So our first year in Baltimore, the students were able to help our partners organizations get $100 million more for school facilities in Maryland and in Baltimore. So we were able to see that this approach worked on several different levels, and so we've been doing it ever since.
That's awesome. You talked a little bit about this, but in terms of inspiration, was there like a moment you decided, or was it just kind of like a gradual thing, like you were like, all right, it's been long enough, we got to do something?
I think it was a series of moments. The first moment that we had an idea was on a road trip where we were just thinking about things that we would like to photograph, and we talked about driving cross country and thinking about what would be really interesting coffee table books, and had this idea to photograph schools and to put photos of underfunded schools next to photos of well-funded schools. And then our second realization was that nobody cared what photographs we took, but that they wanted to see what the students saw, so that we had to get photographs in their hands. And then we realized that this worked, and that took a while, and we had to see that it worked for the students and that they enjoyed the process and they got things out of the process. We had to see the public engagement piece work, and we had to see that this could actually provoke policy change. And then I think there were realizations afterwards that there was demand for this, there was a need to keep doing this. This wasn't just a one-time project, and then began the process of trying to actually build a nonprofit, which wasn't necessarily something we knew from the very beginning that we were trying to do.
Great. What are some ways that you kind of work across traditional boundaries in what you do?
I think one of the ways we work across boundaries is that we combine two fields that have often been kept separate. One is youth art, and that's a really important field where students are given artistic vehicles to express themselves, and that can take hundreds of different forms. And we include that as part of what we do. And then there's also a youth activism side where groups work with students to make sure that their voices get heard on important issues, which is also really important work. But we try to straddle the two and to make sure that we use media intentionally, strategically, to have an impact on policy. And there are certainly groups that have done some amazing work across the country, but it's trying to fill that niche and staying at that intersection that we think makes us unique and works across boundaries. The other item that we include in our approach that I think helps cross boundaries is that we work a lot with partner organizations, and that includes schools, youth-serving organizations, but also adult advocacy organizations who work on different campaigns that we can help leverage by including the students and their voices and their images.
Great. And I know you're kind of obviously education reform is one of your causes, but overall, what do you think are some of the challenges facing youth, my generation? What are we facing?
I think there are a lot of challenges facing youth. Some are the same that they've always been, and some are new. There's certainly a need to ensure that the quality of public education improves and that students are getting the experience, the education, the lessons, the resources that they need to succeed after high school and ideally after college. So there's certainly the education piece. There are all the pieces, the social pieces outside of education in terms of having access to shelter, food, just all of the basic needs that so many young people grow up not having access to. There are many more homeless youth, for example, than I think many of us realize. So that's a very real issue. And then there are issues around trying to get a job in a difficult economy, competing with people, in many cases, with a lot more experience for the same jobs. Trying to have an impact on international issues and recognizing that this is a much more interconnected world that young people are often trying to change. And so I think there are a lot of challenges facing youth, and we're hopefully helping provide just one tool that can be used in that process.
And what advice would you give to a young person who wants to get more involved in their community or youth mobilization or the political process? What would you tell them?
I think it can be really overwhelming to think about where to start. So my advice would be just to find one group, one step that you can take in terms of advocacy or action or service, and see where that goes, see if that's the right fit and stick with it, see if that helps you find something else that you want to do. But don't be paralyzed by all the different ways that you can have an impact.